a licensed clinical psychologist, and I work here at our university counseling services. And so I work a lot with students. As some of you may know, or most of you may know, we do have a wide variety of student ages, some non-traditional students, so not all within the young adult range, but the overwhelming majority of our clients are. And so this is something that I see a lot, and it comes up in very insidious ways. And so my hope today is to, one, not teach you all about neurodivergency in 45 minutes, because that's not going to happen, but to hopefully help you gain some perspective or understanding of how it does show up and how it might present in clients. I have to keep a fidget in one hand and the mic in the other, apparently, so I have someone else, Christina, up here doing the clickies for me, so be patient with us so that I can have her do it for me. But before we get started, how many folks have experience, training, or knowledge of working with individuals who are neurodivergent? All right, so some of us. All right, would anyone mind sharing like some of those experiences, what it's been like, any challenges or difficulties you might have run into?
A part of it, especially working with folks who may be on the spectrum and with substance use, the need to, there's a couple things. One, rigidity of actions, beliefs, not knowing if they are safe with certain friends, certain people. The need to be accepted is a really driving thing. And then the substance use reinforces a lot of behaviors that are absolutely dangerous, and it's hard for them to break out of those patterns and then move to a different way of behaving. So it's challenging, and it takes a little bit more time and a little bit more patience in helping them to navigate as best I can. One, college campus, and the pressures of wanting to fit in, and that tied into peer pressure with substance use.
Yes, and that's a lot of what we'll be talking about today is the socio-emotional implications of being neurodivergent and how it impacts how people move and breathe in the world. Anyone else want to share their experience before we continue? Oh, I don't know who she's up to.
So another thing that I've noticed with neurodivergent individuals is using substances to mask neurodivergence in order to fit into a neurotypical society. And so a lot of times substance use ends up presenting really differently because it's seen as a tool for success rather than something that is preventing success.
Absolutely, which is another thing we'll be talking about today. And so how I would like to do this is, one, I have the gift of gab. I don't mind sitting up here talking the entire time, but I would like this to be interactive. So my goal is to give you some scenarios, and then I want you to tell me how you would respond given the scenarios, okay? First scenario, you're a child. Let's say younger than double digits, but you can walk and talk, mostly grab snacks and stuff on your own. Your parent looks at you and they say, hey, I need you to go downstairs, and on the second shelf, on the left, I need you to grab this item. You go downstairs, you look on the second shelf, on the left, you don't see the item. What do you do? Look in other places. No. You go tell your parent it's not there. Your parent comes downstairs and they're like, it's right here. And your response is, it's not on the second shelf on the left. How do you think your parent might respond? Are you kidding me? Okay. Annoyance, instantly, right? Okay. Let's say you're a little bit older, you're in grade school. You'd be bopping around in class, maybe at recess. A few girls who've never spoken to you before come up to you and they say, hey, I like your bangs. Did you do them yourself? You say, yes, actually I did. You're very proud of yourself, and you smile and you walk away. A couple minutes later, another student comes up to you and says, hey, are you okay? How do you respond? What are you talking about? I'm doing great. And then the student tells you, oh, they're over there making fun of you and your bangs. And you're like, no, they're not. They just told me they like my bangs. And you go about your merry way. All right. Now you're in high school. You have this big exam thing. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the International Baccalaureate or the IB program. You have to sit for these exams, and there's a slew of them that comes in a row. One of them is for English, and you are to read a passage that you have read sometime during your high school career and reflect on it. You get the passage, it's Canterbury Tales. You hate Canterbury Tales. What do you do? It's a test. What are you gonna do? Somebody say something. Oh, there's no Cliff Notes. It's on the spot. You're doing it right now. I give you the passage. You should have already read this. We've talked about it for a couple months in class. Now I just need you to do it for me by yourself. What do you do? All of those things? Possible. You say, no, thank you. Put it down and you walk out. And then you're greeted by your peers like, that was fast. And you're like, I didn't do it. Why not? I didn't want to. I don't like Canterbury Tales. Now, let's skip forward a little bit in life. You are applying for a job. You get said job. And then you get this very nicely worded email. It has a lot of words in it, okay? But it's very nicely worded, friendly email from one of your new colleagues. You say to yourself, I'm going to respond to this email. A week goes by, you don't do it. 2 weeks go by, you don't do it. And then a month goes by, and you're like, there's no point now. 3 months later, you start this job. You have forgotten about the email. So you try to engage with this coworker, and they are not responsive. What do you do? Oh, no. No, you go to your boss and you're like, she hates me. What do you want me to do about this? And he's like, I don't think that's accurate. Maybe you should go ask her. Talk to her about it. You say, okay, so now what do? You do confront her, but how do you confront her?
Aggressively.
Are y'all just calling me a mean person? That's rude. I wasn't aggressive. I just walked in and I said, do you hate me? Why? Because that's what my boss told me to do. She's very distressed. I can tell she's distressed, right? And I'm just like, I know you hate me. Can you just say it so we can get it over with and I know how to respond in this situation? And she goes, I don't hate you. You never responded to my email. And then all of a sudden it comes back to you, that very lovely worded email that had a lot of words in it that you fully intended to respond to, but forgot all about. And you just say, I hate emails. How do you think your coworker responds? Nah, Christina's great. She goes, okay. And that's it. And that's how I made my first friend at work. And so all of these collections or events have been things that I've experienced in my life. And up until I got to University Counseling Services, I had no idea that I was neurodivergent. Until a bunch of things just kept happening, and I had ran out of space of I can't do this anymore. So I reach out for help, and I get diagnosed with ADHD. And I'm like, that's not true. I've never struggled in school. Actually, I'm a phenomenal student. And then a slew of other things happen, and I slowly work through and remember all of these memories, these core events, and I'm like, oh, crap. I was living a completely different experience. And people were responding to their version of the world, and I am responding to my version of the world. And it is very distressing to have that experience. So that's why I have my fidget spinner up here. It helps me regulate. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, depending on how you want to look for it, the DARE program worked on me. And so I never turned to substances for support. because I was deathly afraid of being rejected by all of my peers if I did, because that's what they told me would happen. So instead, I move and breathe in the world, trying my best. But what it ends up resulting in is emotional outbursts, dysregulation, a lot of miscommunication, and a lot of interpersonal concerns. So my goal today is to help you understand how it is that being neurodivergent impacts individuals and how it can show up in various ways and how that puts them at an increased risk for substance use and what we can do to help prevent ongoing addiction and continual misuse. Again, I got 45 minutes, not going to teach you everything. Yeah, we can go. Okay. Neurodiversity definition. Most notably, I think people are familiar with ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, but neurodiversity can account for a number of diagnoses, but all it means is that your brain works different than what they have determined is the default setting. And it impacts you in a lot of different ways. And so one of those things is, if we think about it, particularly for folks who are on the spectrum and have ADHD, their brain chemistry works different, particularly with neurotransmitters, so dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. And how they respond is based on this difference in their brain chemistry. That's not my degree. I'm not about to go into all the science about that, but you should know that it makes a difference. There's also structural differences, so the size of different parts of the brain is different for folks who are neurodivergent. And all of these things impact how they experience the world around them. The next thing is socio-emotional aspects of it. And so one thing that is really hard for, if you've ever worked with someone who's neurodivergent, they know they're different, they don't know why they're different. And so they spend a lot of time, effort, and emotional energy trying to figure out how to be normal, which requires a lot of time and energy. So imagine being in school, being at work, just trying to get through life, in the grocery store, wherever it is that you are. And you know that something weird is going to happen, but you don't know why it's going to happen. And so a lot of your energy is focused on just trying to appear normal, which never works out. And ultimately, those weird experiences still happen. So you go through life collecting all of these experiences. And what do you do with them? You internalize them. There must be something wrong with me. I must not be friendly. People just don't like me. Maybe I'm the one that's the problem. Turns out I'm not, okay? But I understand now. But imagine if you never got diagnosed. What if you're just walking around the world having a bunch of these negative experiences and misunderstandings repeatedly in every space and every relationship that you're in? What do you think you would do? Absolutely, isolate. What else? Escape. I heard Christina said someone said that. I didn't hear you, but I trust that you said that. I can't hear. Mask. Yes. Masking. And masking is essentially trying to appear normal. And there's a lot of research and a ton of data about how masking negatively impacts not just like mental health, but physiological health, the stress and toll that it takes on people. And so after a long day of masking, you get home and you are still worked up because all day you've been working to be normal. And so all of these things become risk factors for substance use. I just want to relax at the end of the day. I don't really know what's happening. I'm feeling overstimulated, understimulated. I need to feel something different. And so what often happens is a lot of folks report using substances, but not knowing why. They'll say, oh, I need it to help me sleep. Oh, it helps me be social. But not in a social, like I'm socially anxious, or like it just allows me to engage, and that I know that there's a difference between us, but I don't focus on that difference. So managing symptoms or just eliminating emotional distress altogether. Now, one of the things that is interesting is when students come in and they're sharing about what they are struggling with, how do you know if they're neurodivergent? What does it look like? This is not a rhetorical question. Exactly. You don't know. People have gotten so good at masking that they honestly don't know how to describe what they are experiencing. And so if they don't know how to describe what they're experiencing, what they usually revert to is like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. I don't like being in social situations, which we'll diagnose as social anxiety. Or, I just can't get my work done. Procrastination is it's a normal thing. All college students do it, right? Here are some tips and tricks that could help you. Second, time management, okay? Get a planner. We go through all of these things to try to help people, not recognizing that they've probably tried all of these things and it hasn't worked. So how does this impact their daily functioning? Absolutely. It's hard. I know that when I open my eyes in the morning, there's a slew of things that I am supposed to do to appear normal, starting with hygiene. What if I find hygiene very boring? Oh yeah, I'm not gonna do it. But I also know that if I go out in public, people are gonna shame me for it, so I'm just not gonna go out in public. Well, now I'm stuck in my house by myself. I'm avoiding whatever responsibilities I'm supposed to. And now I feel bad about myself because I should have been doing X, Y, Z. How might productivity culture and morality impact how we view people who share these experiences? I heard that too much. I'm not working hard enough.
I'm a failure.
You can't get anything done. You're a failure. You're not disciplined enough. You don't care enough. You don't want it enough. And I was thinking about this as we were listening to Jan Brown's presentation yesterday, because there's a lot of the things that she was sharing about in terms of ambivalence that folks who are neurodivergent also hear. The reasoning is different. But if you don't know that, how do you treat this person? What do? You try motivational interviewing, and then it doesn't work. So then what do? Asking more questions. That is a very good answer. That's not often what happens. Sometimes. I can, if they know. But what if you aren't neurodivergent? What do? Yeah, we're about to put you on a plan. We're going to try a bunch of different things. We're going to see what sticks. And if it doesn't, then it must be you, right? And then after all of this, the question is, how are they managing? They're not. They're not. One, being neurodivergent, your threshold or capacity for emotional distress or distress tolerance, little, if at all. And so all of these things keep happening, you keep reaching out for help, and people keep telling you it's your fault. And now you've internalized this message of, it just must be me. Why even bother? And a lot of folks turn to substance use. Why I am chaotic by birth, I am a clinician by training. And so I would like to walk you through a clinical case of mine. I have her demographics up here. So 20-year-old, first-generation American, South Asian, cis woman. She's questioning her sexuality. She identified as Hindu, but she doesn't really practice. It's important to her family, not really to her. She comes in, her presenting concern is difficulty managing anxiety, completing assignments, and just all around low motivation. Okay. When I ask about symptoms, Anxiety. Okay, what does that look like? Turns out it's racing thoughts all the time. I can't make it stop. What do you mean you can't make it stop? It doesn't matter what I'm doing. There's always a million thoughts going on in my head. And it makes it really difficult to take an exam, to complete an assignment, to wash a load of laundry. Okay. What else is going on? Well, I'm irritable. Sometimes I'm with my friends and I don't know why, but I just snap. What do you mean you just snap? 1 minute I'm okay. They're talking, I'm engaged, and then something happens, and then all of a sudden, I feel hot. And now I have to react. Okay. Anger and frustration. Everything pisses me off. Same. But what do you mean by that? Well, I'm angry at myself because I can't just do these things. I'm so frustrated. I have all of these things that I need to get done. I know I need to get them done. I can't do it, no matter how hard I try. Now, that's what she shares. My thought is cultural and identity considerations. What are some things that might come up, given just the brief information that I shared to you about this client? Sexuality. Yes. Obedience is big, and you are supposed to succeed. And then there's the additional pressure of, I'm a first-generation American. My parents gave up so much for me. I need to be good. I need to find a job. I need to be successful. Not only that, I have to be all of those things, but I can't tell them about my sexuality. I can't tell them that I really don't have the same spiritual faith practice, I don't believe, the way they do. And so in a lot of ways, I need to show up and be the right person for my family, which means I can't be me. What are some other cultural considerations that would come up for this client?
I'm a single dad. My son has he has social anxiety, and it's really hard to understand, because he has depression and he has anxiety, and it seems like he might be lazy, but he's dealing with stuff all the time, and he's funny, he's smart, he's I'm like his only friend, and I want him to get out and meet people and have a life, but he's just he's kind of stuck. And I know I did a workshop one time about schizophrenia, and they put earbuds in my ear, and I had voices telling me that I was no good, I'll never amount to nothing. At the same time, this guy was trying to make me take this test, and I couldn't take the test because I had all these voices in my head. I couldn't pass it. So, I mean, it really lets you know what people are dealing with. And I could understand a little more about what my son was dealing with. All I can do is be patient, loving, and supportive.
Yeah, that is a really good simulation. And I hope that if you have the opportunity to do so, and they do it in a variety of different ways, but it's particularly useful for social anxiety of like all the negative thoughts that is running through someone's mind, which also occurs for folks who are neurodivergent. It allows you to see what they're experiencing and then ask you to try to still engage. And so you get a really good understanding of how tiring it is to try to be normal. I will say, if you're going to speak, please just raise your hand. I have people in the audience that I look at that are my staff members, okay, to make it look like I'm looking at you all, but I'm not. I promise. So just raise your hand so that I know that you're talking. And I got you.
All right. You looking at me?
I'm looking at you.
All right, cool. Okay. I was saying for like the culture and identity considerations for her, like when you have those racing thoughts, like it's hard for you to understand which voice is you, that she's trying to identify. She's trying to also like strive to get assignments done that's something that sounds like she wants to do, but is frustrated that she can't, even with a load of laundry. So like her identity consideration is that she really wants to kind of find herself like in some ways. And I don't focus on like and finding herself in like sexuality ways too. Like she just can't get there. You know what I mean? That's all I gotta say, period.
Thank you. So I see the hands, okay? I also need to be mindful of time. I said I have the gift of gab. We could stay on this for the rest of the presentation. So just give me 1 second. One of the things that was really important that you just mentioned is whose voice is this? Whose words is this? And so when she originally presented, it was like, is this pressure and distress from her parents? Is this culturally related? It could be. And so I go through a slew of questions, asking about things. But one of the most important things to tear apart the two is asking about childhood. Before all of these expectations, I mean, there's still some expectation to like be a good child, be a good daughter, do well in school, which she never struggled with. So before the struggle came, how did you engage with people? What was that like? How did your parents respond to you? Oh, I don't know. I don't think I did a good job making friends. Why not? I didn't get it. Okay. What do you mean you didn't get it? I don't know. I thought it was like something was different, and I just assumed it's because I'm a first-generation American. Culturally, I'm different. I'm like, okay, I can see that. Tell me more. And the more she tells me, the more I recognize is like some of these things are cultural, definitely some racism in there. But a lot of the things is she's missing social cues, missing a lot of social cues because she lives in her own world. About a month into working with her, I say, hey, I think you have ADHD. I would like you to go get tested. She is like, not gonna do that. I can't tell my parents that. They're not gonna pay for it. I don't have the money. It took us about 8 months to get her parents on board. She goes to testing. She tells whoever the person is doing her testing, you know what they say to her? I don't think you have ADHD, I think you have bipolar. Why might they say that? Over there, waving the hand.
Because of the mood swings and emotional dysregulation and the inherent medical misogyny. If you're a woman who can't control your emotions, you're bipolar.
Absolutely. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She comes in and she's like, I'm really confused. I know you told me before I went, ignore what they say, just answer their questions. And she's like, but he told me I didn't have ADHD. And I said, yeah, he told you you had bipolar. I told you don't listen. Answer the questions, do the testing. She finally got her results back after 2 months. And she's formally diagnosed. How do you think she reacted? Oh, no, not shocked. She was pissed. Furious. Because she has been spending her entire life telling people something is wrong. I'm not getting it. I need more help. I don't understand what you're not understanding. I am telling you exactly what I'm experiencing, but nobody's responding. That's very infuriating.
I'll try to make this short. I was diagnosed with ADHD somewhere around 46 years old. And it was interesting because when I finally went and got tested, and the psychologist read the report, he says, I can imagine you struggle with this. And the more he read, I just literally just cried. Not out of sadness, but from just finally having an answer to why all of this stuff never seemed to make sense and why, all of that. So I can see how absolutely all of this can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lot to manage. But now we have a diagnosis. ADHD treatment, typically stimulant prescription. What if she uses marijuana on a regular basis? What happens?
She can still take stimulants.
She can.
She can.
The question is, will the provider prescribe it?
It depends on the provider.
It does. And
But
so
she
now we're in this
can.
like dancey dance of like, we have a diagnosis. You can understand why she's doing this. Can we get her prescribed appropriate medication in hopes that she'll learn to better self-regulate, is better able to focus, get her work done, and eventually with therapy, all this, that's how I'm thinking about it. How the provider is thinking about it is, she's at risk for abusing these substances. Well, if you consider what she's doing, abuse versus self-medicating. And so, I'm not gonna argue with you, not my job. You do what you do, we're gonna find a provider that works for us, that works with us. Because if we had told her no, what was the point of going through all of this? Now she has told her parents that she's in therapy. What? Why are you sad? We provide a good life for you. You're just lazy. Not only that, we had them pay for a very expensive evaluation. Now just to be telling them, I actually can't get treatment because I'm using marijuana. How is that helpful at all? It's not. I did see you raise your hand. No? Someone? Oh.
I'll make it brief too. Why would a provider see as though like medical marijuana would be, I mean, I understand that, you potentially can abuse, but if it's benefiting like her health, like would it be easier? Because I find that like physicians regularly distribute mental health medications without even properly knowing someone's diagnosis. Like every psychiatric medication you give them, they get it in bulk until something happens where they're like, okay, we're going to remove you from this. You know what I mean? Like, so why would that be any different from her, especially after getting her diagnosis?
Students aren't sharing their Zoloft, okay? They're not passing around their Wellbutrin. They are hoarding their Adderall and selling it to their friends. Mm-hmm. I understand the concern. I get it. But that doesn't help my client.
Don't do it again.
Someone's grabbing the mic. I see you.
Good morning. So I feel like religion, it's passed down in generations and generations. So you could be third generation American if you practice a certain religion. Religion holds you to a certain standard. So all these feelings and, reported symptoms and concerns, like if you practice a certain religion, they're going to be thrown out the window, and they're going to be like, well, you need to pray more, you need to follow the 10 Commandments and whatever it is that they do, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like the religion piece is extremely important, especially since like probably your clients' parents, the reason why they're acting that way was because the religion that they practiced early on in their life, and they brought it here to America.
Could be. We didn't talk much about faith for her, but we did talk about it a lot for her parents and how they use that as evidence of her not being good enough. It bothers me, if you can't tell. All of this to say, there's so many things that are going on with people that we can easily attribute to other factors. She's a first-generation American. We assume that she's having like social difficulties because of her identities, which we should not negate, and is definitely true. And then also, I'm struggling. I'm feeling stressed. I'm very anxious about these things. We just assume it's just pressure from her parents. Part of it is, but also is the part of like she really wants to do well and is very intelligent. And so she knows that she knows the information. She just doesn't want to do it. There's no desire to. We have a provider that she's working with and has been working with, and it's a world of difference for her. And so now what we're doing is processing the anger. All the anger that comes up from everyone who ignored her symptoms. All the ways she believes her life could have been better, how she could have been more successful had she been diagnosed earlier. All the shame that could have been erased or eliminated had she been diagnosed earlier. Now, that's not to say that there wouldn't have been stigma if she had been diagnosed earlier, but it would have been attributed to a mental health diagnosis versus her as a person. So identifying vulnerabilities and risk factors. One, dual diagnosis challenges. A lot of these symptoms that present for folks who are neurodivergent show up in a lot of different ways. We just had someone share about his son who has social anxiety. How I would treat social anxiety versus someone who has social anxiety because they have communication or interpersonal difficulties based on neurodivergency is different. So how do I tear apart the two? Depression. Are you depressed, or are you responding to all of the negative experiences that you have had, which are symptoms of depression, but it is situational, right? I would respond to that differently. Other things, race and culture. So we've talked, I've showed you a great example, okay, of how race and culture comes up when we are trying to provide adequate and accurate diagnoses for clients. But some studies just show that there's a big difference in how race and culture impact how people show up socio-emotionally. What are some of those ways that that might happen?
So can I, just on this slide, push back a little bit here? Because for me, going back, identity is not diagnostic.
No, it's not.
It's not an issue. So the issue here is not race, gender, it's racism, sexism, and what's tied is capitalism as part of the problem of neurodivergence. To the person's point about misogyny, those are things that are factored into what makes it problematic.
Oh, I know. And that is how I, thank you. Okay, the answer to the whole question of like, how do we address this? Be kind, check your biases. Okay? But yes, so because of people's race and culture, we interpret it how they present differently. If someone's not making eye contact with you, are they being avoidant? Or is that a sign of respect? Can be either. But if you are only focusing on the behavior and not considering these factors, then you're not likely to, A, evaluate them correctly, which then B, will lead to an inaccurate diagnosis, and lasting, ineffective treatment planning. Gender differences. It talks about young girls being underdiagnosed, but what I don't have up here, okay, is what you were talking about, sir. These differences come up because who are we basing the norm on? White males, not just males, white males. Cis white males, okay? We are comparing people to what we see as normal or the default. And so if you're only considering those things and you only take when their behavior is abnormal from what you expect, and that is the diagnostic criteria, look at all the ways things can be missed. Young girls tend to be hyperverbal. They're not behavioral. They're not like rough and tumble play with like boys that you typically see young boys who get diagnosed with ADHD. They just talk a lot. We attribute that to their gender. So we ignore it as a sign. And so for all of these reasons, our expectations, cultural norms, biases, racism, all the isms, we ignore how clients show up in front of us and share their experiences. Yesterday, Jan Brand asked someone to come up here to talk about ambivalence and a behavior that she wants to change. And she said, I want to be less reactive, and I felt that. I don't want to be less reactive because I don't like how I feel. I want to be less reactive because how people respond to me. Folks who are neurodivergent struggle with something called rejection sensitivity. Anything feels like a slight or a form of rejection. Do you hate me? She does. She's lying. But anyway, if we're considering that these behaviors are normal based on gender or race or something is abnormal, or we're not considering these things, how are we adequately diagnosing people? Well, we're not. I know there's been a lot of research and a lot of buzz across the internets about, oh, everyone has ADHD or everyone's neurodivergent, and it's like, maybe, but also, have we considered that we are just being more aware of how it presents differently in people? How that a lot of people weren't diagnosed for a lot of different reasons when they were younger because their behaviors were excused as, oh, they're just shy. Well, they're just introverted. Not that they have no interest in social connections, that they don't know how to connect with people. Oh, yeah, she talks a lot. She's always daydreaming. I can't get her to pay attention in class, but she gets all her work done. So she's a good student otherwise. And her daydreaming doesn't distract another student, so we let it go. Versus the young boy who's up and out of a seat, cracking jokes, disturbing the class, we're more likely to give attention to that student. Prevention and intervention strategies. It's a very easy thing in theory, okay? Cultural awareness. Can we check our biases at the door when we're working with clients? Jan Brand talked a lot about yesterday about how if we could understand why folks use substances to control their emotions, well, one, how we expect people to express emotions, that is culturally bound. Some of you were taught never to show emotions because emotions are a sign of weakness. Others of you grew up in spaces and places that allowed you to openly show emotions. Either way, we have expectations of how people should present. If I say that this client is depressed, you expect them to be sad, maybe some suicidal ideations, low motivation, but what if it just shows up as irritability? Which often happens for Black women. So cultural awareness. If we can better understand what is happening for clients and give them accurate diagnosis beforehand, this could be shown to have a better prognosis. Makes sense, right? Building strong support systems. This is more about like helping people recognize how neurodivergency shows up so differently in different spaces. If you can think about an interaction at any point in your life, you probably engage with somebody, you're like, that person's weird. That's a little off. They're so off-putting. They have no clue. But your thought is, how are they so unaware? I'm not saying they're neurodivergent. They might be off-putting. They might be a little weird. But if we could understand better and be more readily thoughtful about how we are evaluating people's behaviors, and build some support around that. Can we come up with teams and spaces where they can be successful? I started off by sharing with you a lot of my experiences that I was like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. I'm perfect, right? I get to UCS, I struggle a lot. I don't know what's happening. They don't know what's happening. I get a diagnosis, things still don't get better. One of the reasons is I need to know what works for me. What supports do I need? I'm a chatty Cathy. So I find the people in the office who like to talk, and I made them my besties. Okay? I'm never in my office. So you gotta text me or G-chat me if you want me to do something, because I'm not there. Don't send me an email. I'm not gonna read it. And if you do, if you must, just put in the subject line what the important part is that you need me to know. Can we have support set up like that? That's what I'm talking about. Also developing coping skills. It's not everybody's problem, it is mine, right? And hopefully that I can have places and spaces that are people who are willing to work with me. But also developing coping skills. So today, I knew I had to give this presentation. I broke down 4 times already. It was a mess. But what I did was like, hey, can you sit like over there or back there so I can look at you and I know you. So I can look like I'm looking at people, but I'm not. Okay? And as that went along, I was able to make eye contact with a lot of you. The more I grew, the more I stood up here, the more comfortable I got. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not afraid that I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm afraid that you might not understand what I'm trying to communicate with you because I communicate differently. I was told that I have 1 minute left. So, collaborative care. So let's say you do get diagnosed later in life. They're already using substances. Here are some things that we could do. So multidisciplinary collaboration. This got to be a team effort. I was raised in a household and a culture that says it takes a village, okay? And it does. So can we get a bunch of people on board who understand the unique challenges of the clients that we are working with to help them, develop a more functional life? That is the goal. I don't need you to be normal, I need you to be functional. So if you know that you're not going to shower before you leave the house, can we hit the hot spots? Okay? If you're not gonna brush your teeth, I need you to get a really good mouthwash. If you're not gonna cook your own meals, why not just get a rotisserie chicken, frozen vegetables, something quick and easy that you can all readily just use. I know they tell you, eat clean, cook all your meals. Get those frozen vegetables, get those canned vegetables, pop them in a microwave. That's what I need you to do, right? So this comes into transition planning. How do we help clients who are now have a diagnosis, getting proper treatment, still might be in recovery for their substance use? I say might because some of them still choose to use, which is okay. Harm reduction. Are you still living functionally? Is things okay? But all of those things need to be set up in place because it was all of those things that led to this, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't get it right. So if I'm helping you transition into a more functional way of living, you're more likely to be successful and less likely to rely on substances to cope. That leads into personalized care plans. One size that does not fit all. I'm not going to go over that with you because Jan Brown did it with you yesterday, for those of you who attended, but it's self-explanatory. Everyone needs their own things. There's a couple neurodivergent folk in our office. What works for me does not work for them. Some people are able to scare themselves into doing their notes. I am able to pretend like they do not exist. Out of sight, out of mind, and I get in trouble for it. I accept those consequences, I cry about it, but I know I'm gonna do it. And so I have Christina. She's the woman I walked into her office and I said, do you hate me? We tell that story all the time because it was very distressing for her. For me, I was just like, my boss told me to go ask you, so I did, okay? I needed an answer, yes or no, quickly. She's my executive functioning. She does. She does a great job for it. She doesn't get paid extra. I think that my payment is my present in her life because I'm amazing, okay? But she has created something called Wednesday Surprise. What is Wednesday Surprise, you ask? I never know what it is. As long as I don't have any red notes on my task list, I get Wednesday Surprise. Sometimes it's like, let's go on a coffee date. Sometimes it's lunch. Sometimes we're painting pumpkins. Oh yeah, all right? Sometimes it's like, we're gonna go do this very fun thing. How she gets me to do it is, I have FOMO. I never want to miss out. I don't care what it is. She can't tell me what it is in advance because then I can determine whether or not it's worth it. Does Wednesday Surprise work for other people? Maybe, maybe not, but that's what works for me. So can we develop personalized care plans for people to help them live more functionally? Thank you. Oh, look at that.
Are there support groups just specifically for neurodivergent people?
Thank you for asking.
How do they find each other? Because there are lots of people that need that support to be able to understand that they're not just the only one.
So At UCS, we actually do have an ADHD support group, and we are working to start an autism spectrum disorder support groups. And we advertise it, and this is a place for students to come. And we have our staff members lead it. It is not meant to be a therapy group, but more so support, so they can see like, oh, these are other people who are also struggling. It has been really responsive. In fact, of all of our identity-based support groups, that one is held virtually because like the first session, or like when it first came out, it was like 100 people logged on. So they're out there. And they just need someone to provide space for them. But that's a good question. We do that, at least at the University Counseling Centers. In your own places, you might be something you want to consider.
Also, they do have one on Facebook. They have a couple of different support groups for ADHD as well.
Yeah, so digital ones. For our college students, okay, COVID did a number on them. And social skills went out the window. And so we tried to get them to interact and engage with people they know and can see to help with that. But if that's the only option, absolutely.
So my son is neurodivergent, and we actually had to take him out of high school because the bullying got so bad for him. Mm-hmm. And I recognized quickly that high school was going to change my son, my beautiful son, forever. And I'm so glad that we had the support of the high school staff and the counselors that supported my decision to take him out, because he is still beautiful, he's still himself. And I'm very thankful too, because within his educational program, they had a therapist that came up to him and invited him to tap for therapy. It's anyone that plays like tabletop games like D&D, Magic of the Gathering, but it targets neurodivergence and creates a very safe space for them to interact. And then the therapy is mixed in, but also teaches them life skills. And it's been a beautiful journey, and I'm just really, really thankful for that. Thanks for
That is really amazing to hear. I did not have that in high school, unfortunately. But my teachers were really responsive. They were. I will say that. Shout outs to them. Chef's kiss. Well, that has been my two people. It was three, actually, but thank you for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Fanning.